An ancient king protected his book collection with terrifying divine curses, promising blindness and a name wiped from existence for any would-be thief. Thousands of years ago, librarians carefully baked stories onto clay, including a chillingly familiar tale of a great flood that wiped out humanity. And deep beneath volcanic ash, an entire private library lay perfectly preserved for nearly 2 millennia, its charred scrolls still holding secrets that scientists are only now beginning to unlock with cutting-edge technology. Rivalry between two ancient megalibraries even sparked the invention of a whole new writing surface when one empire cut off the other's supply of papyrus. Number 8. The Palace Libraries of Ugarit, where stories were baked in clay. Imagine stumbling upon a lost city, its records not turned to dust, but hardened by the very fire that destroyed it. That's what happened at Ugarit, an ancient port city on the coast of Syria, now known as Ras Shamra. Around 3,200 years ago, this bustling hub of trade and culture vanished, only to be rediscovered by accident in 1928, when a farmer's plow hit a stone that turned out to be part of a tomb. Soon, French archaeologist Claude Schaeffer and his team began excavating, and what they found was a civilization's memory captured on thousands of clay tablets. These weren't just any tablets. They were Ugarit's libraries and archives, found in various locations, including the royal palace, private houses, and even a priest's residence. It seems Ugarit was a city that valued its written words. Palace itself yielded several distinct collections. One room, near the palace entrance, seemed to be a kind of administrative office, filled with records of taxes, trade, and legal matters. Another collection found in the western part of the palace contained diplomatic letters, showing Ugarit's connections with powerful empires like the Hittites and Egypt. These clay letters reveal a complex world of international relations, royal marriages, and demands for tribute. But perhaps the most exciting finds were the literary and religious texts. These included epic poems like the Baal Cycle, which tells the story of the storm god Baal, his battles with the sea god Yam, and the god of Dethma. There was also the legend of Karat, about a king who loses his family and seeks divine help to restore his line, and the tale of Ak concerning a hero, his divine bow, and a tragic fate. These stories give us an incredible window into Canaanite mythology, beliefs that would have been common in the lands where the early Hebrew scriptures later emerged. What made Ugarit's libraries particularly astonishing was the use of a unique cuneiform script. While much of the ancient Near East used complex Mesopotamian cuneiform with hundreds of signs, the scribes of Ugarit developed their own alphabetic cuneiform system with only about 30 signs. This was a revolutionary step toward simpler writing. Tablets were found written in this Ugaritic script, but also in Akkadian, the international language of the time, Sumerian, Hurrian, and even a few in Cypro, Minoan, and Hittite hieroglyphs, showing Ugarit's cosmopolitan nature. Some tablets were clearly school texts used to train young scribes. There were lexical lists, essentially dictionaries with words in multiple languages, and practice exercises. Scribes were highly valued. Some tablets even bear the names of their scribes, like the famous Elimelech, who copied several major literary works. There's evidence that some important tablets were baked in kilns to preserve them deliberately. Little did they know that the final catastrophe, around 1180 BCE, when mysterious invaders known as the Sea Peoples swept through the region, would inadvertently preserve the rest. The fires that consumed Ugarit baked the clay tablets hard like pottery, allowing them to survive for millennia until their rediscovery. These baked books tell us of a vibrant, literate society that existed long before many of the civilizations we often think of as ancient. Number 7. The Villa of the Papyri, a Roman holiday home. hiding a philosophical treasure chest. In 79 CE, Mount Vesuvius erupted with catastrophic force, burying the Roman cities of Pompeii and Herculaneum under a thick blanket of volcanic ash and pumice. While a tragedy, this event created an incredible archaeological time capsule. At Herculaneum, a luxurious seaside villa believed to have belonged to Lucius Calpurnius Piso, Caesoninus, Julius Caesar's father-in-law, held a unique secret: an entire library of ancient scrolls. This wasn't a public institution, but the private collection of a wealthy Roman aristocrat, offering a rare glimpse into personal intellectual pursuits of the era. The Villa of the Papyri, as it came to be known, was discovered in the 1750s during early haphazard tunneling explorations. Workers digging through the hardened volcanic materials stumbled upon what they initially thought were pieces of charcoal. These were in fact hundreds of papyrus scrolls carbonized by the intense heat of the pyroclastic flow that engulfed Herculaneum. The lack of oxygen in the dense volcanic packing prevented them from burning to ash, instead preserving them as brittle, blackened cylinders. Over 1,800 such scrolls were eventually recovered from one room of the villa. Imagine the excitement and frustration. Here was a whole ancient library. But how to read its contents? Early attempts to unroll the scrolls were often disastrous. One method, developed by an Italian priest named Antonio Piaggio, involved a machine that slowly tried to separate the layers. While it had some success, many scrolls were damaged or destroyed in the process. For centuries, the vast majority of the collection remained unreadable, their philosophical wisdom locked away. The scrolls that could be deciphered even partially revealed a treasure trove, primarily of Greek philosophical texts. The library was heavily focused on the works of Epicurean philosophers, particularly Philodemus of Gadara, a philosopher and poet who lived in the 1st century BCE and was associated with Piso. Dozens of his works, many previously unknown, were identified, covering ethics, music, rhetoric, and theology. This has given modern scholars an unprecedented insight into Epicureanism, a philosophy often misunderstood. There were also works by other Epicureans, and tantalizingly fragments of Latin poetry. The villa itself was enormous and lavishly decorated with stunning bronze and marble sculptures, reflecting Piso's wealth and cultured tastes. The library room was relatively small, with wooden shelves lining the walls where the scrolls were stored, likely in wooden chests or capsae. The discovery of this library gives us a very personal connection to the intellectual life of a specific Roman individual. Today, the Villa of the Papyri is a source of ongoing research and excitement. While much of the villa remains unexcavated, buried deep under the modern town of Ercolano, advanced technology is breathing new life into the already recovered scrolls. Scientists are using techniques like multispectral imaging, X-ray phase contrast tomography, and even artificial intelligence to virtually unroll and read the fragile texts without physically damaging them. The Vesuvius Challenge, a recent competition, successfully used AI to decipher passages from still-rolled scrolls, proving that many more secrets may yet be coaxed from these carbonized remains. Each newly deciphered word offers a fragment of lost ancient thought, a voice from before the volcano silenced so much. What other masterpieces of literature or philosophy might still be waiting in those blackened husks or in the unexcavated portions of the villa is a question that keeps researchers digging both literally and idly. Number 6. The Library of Celsus. A Roman masterpiece built for books and a father's memory. In the bustling Roman city of Ephesus, a vibrant metropolis in what is now Western Turkey, stood a library that was as much a monument as it was a repository of knowledge. The Library of Celsus, with its stunningly ornate facade, wasn't just a place to read. It was a grand public gesture, a testament to wealth, status, and filial piety. It was completed around 117 to 120 CE by Tiberius Julius Aquila Ptolemaios, a Roman consul, in honor of his father, Tiberius Julius Celsus Ptolemaios. Celsus had been a prominent figure, a Roman senator, governor of the province of Asia, and a wealthy local benefactor. In a unique arrangement, Celsus himself was buried in a crypt beneath the library, making it a mausoleum as well as a center of learning. The library's facade, partially reconstructed from original pieces, is what captivates visitors today. It's a two-story structure with Corinthian columns, intricate carvings, and niches that once held statues. These statues personified the virtues attributed to Celsus: Sophia, wisdom; orate, virtue; enoia, thought or intelligence; and episteme, knowledge or understanding. Their presence emphasized the library's role in promoting these qualities. The central entrance was taller and wider than the two flanking ones, a common feature in Roman monumental architecture designed to create an illusion of even greater size and grandeur. Inside the library was designed with both aesthetics and practicality in mind. It was a single, spacious rectangular room, about 17 meters long by 11 meters wide. The walls were lined with rectangular niches, or armaria, where the papyrus scrolls were stored, likely in wooden cabinets. Estimated that the Library of Celsus could hold around 12,000 scrolls. This made it one of the largest libraries in the Roman Empire, though smaller than those in Alexandria or Pergamum. One of the most ingenious features of its design was a system to protect the precious scrolls from the extremes of temperature and humidity common in Ephesus. There were double walls behind the bookcases. An outer wall provided structural support, and an inner wall, separated by a narrow corridor about 1 meter wide, housed the actual niches. This air gap helped to insulate the scrolls, preventing damage from dampness that could cause mold or insects, and from excessive dryness that could make papyrus brittle. A gallery ran around the upper level of the interior, accessible by a staircase likely providing access to more niches, or a walkway for scholars. Aquila not only paid for the construction of the library, but also bequeathed a substantial sum of 25,000 denarii for its ongoing maintenance and the acquisition of new scrolls. This ensured its vitality as a living institution. The library would have been a key intellectual center in Ephesus, a city renowned for its schools of philosophy and medicine. Scholars, students, and literate citizens could consult its collection, which likely included works of Greek and Latin literature, philosophy, history, and oratory. The library's active life seems to have come to an end in 262 CE, when a devastating earthquake struck Ephesus. Some scholars also suggest it may have been damaged or destroyed during a Gothic invasion around the same time. Contents were likely lost or destroyed then. For centuries, its ruins lay buried until Austrian archaeologists began excavating Ephesus in the early 20th century. Careful work of these archaeologists led to the remarkable reconstruction of its facade in the 1970s, allowing us to appreciate at least the external splendor of this ancient house of wisdom and remembrance. It stands as a powerful reminder of how Romans valued knowledge and how they integrated learning into the very fabric of their urban and monumental landscapes. Number 5. The Ulpian Library. Rome's double-decker powerhouse of knowledge. When Emperor Trajan wanted to leave his mark on Rome, he did so in spectacular fashion with Trajan's Forum, a vast complex of plazas, markets, a monumental basilica, and at its very heart, a renowned center of learning, the Ulpian Library or Bibliotheca Ulpia, inaugurated around 112 to 113 CE. This was not just any library. It was one of the grandest and most important in the Roman world, reflecting the empire's power and its embrace of Hellenic culture alongside its own. The Oppian Library, named after Trajan's family name, Marcus Oppius Triens, had a distinctive feature. It was housed in two separate symmetrical buildings. These structures flanked Trajan's Column, the magnificent sculpted monument celebrating the emperor's victories in Dacia. One building was dedicated to works in Latin, and the other to works in Greek. This separation highlighted the bilingual nature of Roman high culture and scholarship, where both traditions were esteemed. Each hall was a substantial structure, likely with high ceilings, ample light, and walls lined with niches for storing scrolls. Estimates suggest that each section could have held over 20,000 scrolls, making its total collection vast for the ancient world. These weren't just leisure reading rooms. The Oppian Library also served as a state archive. It housed important public records, including senatorial decrees, senatus consulta, edicts of the praetors, and possibly census records. This dual function as both a repository of literature and an official archive made it a vital institution in the civic and administrative life of Rome. Scholars like Aulus Gellius, writing in the 2nd century CE, mentioned using the library for his research, indicating it was accessible to the learned public. The library buildings were richly decorated, in keeping with the splendor of Trajan's Forum. Excavations have revealed remnants of marble floors and decorative elements. Imagine scholars moving between the two halls, perhaps pausing to admire Trajan's Column, its spiraling narrative reliefs recounting military campaigns, before immersing themselves in the words of philosophers, poets, historians, or orators from either the Greek or Roman traditions. There were likely reading rooms, and perhaps even spaces for lectures or scholarly discussions. The Oppian Library enjoyed a long life. It was considered one of Rome's premier intellectual centers for centuries. Even after the capital of the empire shifted, its importance endured. There are records indicating that some of its collections were moved to the Baths of Diocletian by Emperor Diocletian in the late 3rd or early 4th century, possibly to consolidate resources or because parts of Trajan's Forum were undergoing changes. However, the library in Trajan's Forum, or at least parts of it, continued to be mentioned by writers into the 5th century CE. Its eventual fate is not precisely known. Likely a slow decline along with the city of Rome itself in late antiquity, suffering from neglect, possible fires, or pilfering of its contents over time. The ruins of Trajan's Forum today give only a faint impression of its former grandeur, but historical accounts and archaeological fragments help us piece together a picture of the Oppian Library as a monumental ambition, a place where the written heritage of two great cultures was preserved and celebrated side by side. It set a standard for large-scale public libraries in the Roman world and beyond. Number 4. The Imperial Library of Constantinople. The fortress that guarded ancient wisdom for 1,000 years. While many great libraries of antiquity faded with the Western Roman Empire, one city became a crucial bridge, preserving classical knowledge for a millennium. Constantinople. The Imperial Library of Constantinople, though its origins are somewhat hazy, likely began under Constantine the Great in the 4th century CE when he established his new capital. It was significantly expanded by his son Constantius II, who recognized the urgent need to preserve deteriorating papyrus scrolls by having them copied onto more durable parchment. This library became a beacon, safeguarding countless texts that might otherwise have been lost to the turmoil of the early medieval period in Western Europe. Primary mission of the Imperial Library was to gather and preserve the entirety of ancient Greek literature, and later Roman works as well. It wasn't just about hoarding books. It was an active center of scholarship. Scribes, known as antiquari, specialists in old texts, and librari, general copyists, worked diligently in scriptoria associated with the library. Their painstaking work was essential. The shift from papyrus scrolls to parchment codices, the book format we recognize today, was a critical factor in this preservation effort. Parchment was far more resilient than papyrus, and the codex form was easier to store, protect, and read. Estimates of the library's size vary wildly and fluctuated over its long history. Some sources suggest it held over 100,000 volumes, at its peak encompassing a vast range of subjects: classical poetry, drama, history, philosophy, rhetoric, medicine, mathematics, and science, alongside an ever-growing collection of Christian theological writings. It contained works by Homer, Plato, Aristotle, Sophocles, Thucydides, Galen, Ptolemy, and countless others. Many of the classical Greek texts we possess today exist only because they were copied and recopied by Byzantine scribes, often originating from or passing through the imperial library. The library was not a single static entity. It was likely housed in various locations within the imperial palace complex or associated buildings over the centuries. It faced numerous challenges. Fires were a recurrent threat in a densely packed city like Constantinople. One particularly devastating fire in 475 CE, during the reign of Emperor Leo I, is said to have destroyed a huge number of scrolls. Periods of political instability, imperial neglect, and theological controversies like iconoclasm also took their toll, sometimes leading to the destruction or dispersal of certain types of texts. Despite these setbacks, the library, or the tradition of imperial book collection and preservation it represented, persisted. Scholars and emperors like Theodosius II and Justinian recognized its value and supported its functions. It served as a resource for the University of Constantinople, another key institution of learning in the Byzantine capital. A catastrophic blow came in 1204 with the Fourth Crusade, when Western European knights and Venetian forces sacked Constantinople. They looted and destroyed with abandon. Eyewitnesses like Nicetas Choniates describe the burning of books, the desecration of churches and palaces, and the theft of countless treasures. While some manuscripts were undoubtedly carried off to the West, many were simply destroyed in the chaos. This event severely crippled the intellectual heart of the Byzantine Empire. The library, in a much reduced form, may have limped on until the final fall of Constantinople to the Ottoman Turks in 1453. After the conquest, surviving manuscripts were dispersed. Some were destroyed, others were gathered into Ottoman collections, and many more found their way into the hands of fleeing Byzantine scholars, who took them to Italy and other parts of Western Europe. This influx of ancient texts and Greek-speaking scholars is credited with playing a significant role in fueling the Renaissance. Though the Imperial Library of Constantinople itself ceased to exist, its legacy is immeasurable, acting as a vital conduit through which the wisdom of the ancient world was transmitted to the modern era. Number 3. The Nalanda Mahavihara Library. India's skyscraper of sacred scrolls. Far from the Mediterranean world in ancient India, another extraordinary center of learning flourished, boasting a library complex of truly legendary proportions. This was Nalanda Mahavihara, located in present-day Bihar, a vast Buddhist monastic university that attracted scholars and students from across Asia for nearly 800 years, from the 5th century CE to around 1200 CE. At the heart of Nalanda's intellectual life was its magnificent library system, known as the Dharmaganya, or Treasury of Dharma, or Treasury of Truth. The Dharmagana was not just one building, but a complex of 3 grand, multi-story edifices: the Ratnasagara, Ocean of Jewels, the Ratnadi Sea of Jewels, and the Ratnaranjaka, Jewel-adorned. Tibetan accounts, particularly from the historian Taranatha, describe the Ratnodadi as being an astonishing 9 stories high. Imagine such a structure in that era. dedicated entirely to housing knowledge, its upper floors reaching towards the sky filled with precious manuscripts. These buildings were architectural marvels, designed to hold an immense collection of texts, and immense it was. The Nalanda Library was reputed to house hundreds of thousands of manuscripts. These were primarily palm leaf manuscripts, pustakas, meticulously inscribed and bound. While Nalanda was a center of Mahayana Buddhist learning, its collection was remarkably diverse. It contained not only vast numbers of Buddhist scriptures, philosophical treatises and commentaries, but also works on grammar, logic, Hetu Vidya, literature, medicine, Ayurveda, astronomy, mathematics, and art. Curriculum at Nalanda was famously broad and intellectually rigorous. The fame of Nalanda and its library drew seekers of knowledge from as far away as China, Tibet, Korea, Japan, Persia, and Southeast Asia. Famous Chinese pilgrims like Xuanzang, Huenzang in the 7th century, and Weijing, Aicing in the late 7th century spent considerable time studying and copying texts at Nalanda. Xuanzang's detailed accounts provide invaluable information about the university's academic life, its thousands of monk scholars and students, its strict rules, and its vibrant intellectual debates. He described the reverence for the manuscripts and the intense scholarly activity that revolved around the library. He himself took hundreds of Sanskrit texts back to China for translation. The process of copying manuscripts was a vital function of the library. Scribes and scholars painstakingly reproduced texts not only for Nalanda's own use, but also to be carried by graduates and visiting scholars back to their homelands. This made Nalanda a crucial center for the dissemination of Buddhist thought and Indian scholarship throughout Asia. The intellectual atmosphere was one of intense debate and study, with scholars specializing in various schools of thought. The end of Nalanda and its magnificent library was tragic and violent. Around 1193 to 1203 CE, Turkic invaders led by Bakhtiyar Khilji swept through Bihar. Nalanda, with its undefended monastic population, was an easy target. Historical accounts, including the Persian chronicle Tabaqat Nasiri, describe the massacre of monks and the deliberate destruction of the university. The libraries, with their priceless collections of manuscripts, were set ablaze. It is said that the Dharmagana burned for months, so vast was the quantity of texts. The smoke from the burning manuscripts hung like a dark shroud over the ruins. The loss of knowledge was incalculable. Countless unique texts, representing centuries of Indian and Buddhist scholarship, vanished forever in the flames. The archaeological site of Nalanda today, with its extensive ruins of monasteries, temples, and stupas, stands as a poignant reminder of this once great center of learning. Though its physical library was destroyed, Nalanda's intellectual influence had already spread far and wide, shaping the course of Buddhism and scholarship in many Asian cultures for centuries to come. Number 2. The Library of Pergamum. The underdog library that invented a writing revolution. In the Hellenistic world, the Library of Alexandria was the undisputed king of knowledge, but it had a serious rival, the Library of Pergamum. Located in the prosperous city of Pergamum in Asia Minor, modern-day Bergama, Turkey. This library was established by the Attalid dynasty, likely under King Eumenes II in the 2nd century BCE. The Attalids were ambitious rulers, determined to make their capital a major cultural and intellectual center, a new Athens. The library was a key part of this vision, and it quickly grew to be the second largest in the ancient Greek world, housing an estimated 200,000 scrolls. The Library of Pergamum was situated on the city's Acropolis, within the sanctuary of Athena Nikephoros, Athena, bringer of victory. This placed it in a sacred and prominent location, overlooking the city. Archaeologists have identified the remains of the library complex near the temple. It seems to have consisted of several rooms, including a large main reading hall. This hall, according to ancient writers like Vitruvius, faced east to take advantage of the morning light. It also featured a large statue of Athena, the goddess of wisdom, emphasizing the library's scholarly purpose. The walls were lined with shelves or niches for the papyrus scrolls. Other rooms likely served as additional storage, study areas, or meeting places for scholars. A fierce rivalry developed between Pergamum and Alexandria, not just in political and economic spheres, but also in the realm of scholarship and book collecting. Both cities vied to attract the best scholars and amass the largest collections. This intellectual competition had an unexpected and revolutionary consequence. According to the Roman writer Pliny the Elder, one of the Ptolemaic pharaohs of Egypt, perhaps Ptolemy V Epiphanes, became so concerned about Pergamum's growing library that he embargoed the export of papyrus to Pergamum. Papyrus, made from reeds grown almost exclusively in Egypt, was the standard writing material of the time. Faced with this papyrus shortage, the scholars and artisans of Pergamum were forced to innovate. They turned to an older writing material, animal skins, and significantly improved its production, creating a smooth, durable, and versatile writing surface. This refined material became known as Pergamena charta, or paper of Pergamum, which evolved into the English word parchment. Parchment, usually made from sheepskin, goatskin, or calfskin, vellum, was more expensive than papyrus, but had several advantages. It was stronger, could be written on both sides, and ink could be scraped off, allowing it to be reused. The development and widespread adoption of parchment in Pergamum was a major technological breakthrough that would profoundly impact the history of books for centuries, especially with the later rise of the Codex. The Library of Pergamum attracted notable scholars, including Crates of Malus, a Stoic philosopher and grammarian who became its head librarian around 168 BC. Crates was famous for his work on Homer and for constructing one of the earliest known terrestrial globes. The library's collection would have included a wide range of Greek literature, philosophy, history, and scientific works, reflecting the broad intellectual currents of the Hellenistic age, with a particular strength in Stoic philosophy and textual criticism. One of the most famous stories associated with the Library of Pergamum comes from Plutarch. He claims that Mark Antony, after a fire damaged the Library of Alexandria, gifted Cleopatra the entire collection of 200,000 scrolls from Pergamum to replenish Alexandria's stocks. While some historians doubt the veracity or scale of this transfer, the story itself highlights the immense prestige and value of Pergamum's collection. The library's influence declined under Roman rule, especially if Antony's gift did indeed strip it of its holdings. However, Pergamum remained an important center of culture and medicine. The invention, spurred by its rivalry with Alexandria, parchment, went on to become the dominant writing material in Europe for over 1,000 years until paper arrived from China. The ruins on Pergamum's Acropolis today, though fragmentary, still evoke the grandeur of a city that dared to challenge Alexandria, and in doing so, changed the way the world wrote. Number 1. The Library of Ashurbanipal. King, who collected nightmares and flood stories on clay. In the 7th century BC, the Assyrian Empire was at the height of its power, and its ruler, King Ashurbanipal, reigned 668–627 BCE, was not just a formidable warrior, but also a passionate scholar and collector. Unlike most rulers of his time, Ashurbanipal boasted of his literacy, claiming he could read complex cuneiform texts and even understand writings from before the flood. He established what is often considered one of the first systematically collected and organized libraries in history at his capital. This royal library wasn't just a king's hobby. It was an instrument of power, a repository of knowledge deemed essential for understanding the world and maintaining the empire. Ashurbanipal was driven by an insatiable desire to gather all existing knowledge of Mesopotamia and beyond. He dispatched scribes throughout his vast empire with explicit orders to find and copy ancient texts. Tablets were sourced from temple libraries, private collections, and older, sometimes conquered cities like Babylon. His agents were instructed to seek out rare tablets and any texts that were missing from the palace collections. Some tablets were outright confiscated. Colophons or inscriptions at the end of tablets often proudly proclaimed Palace of Ashurbanipal, King of the World, King of Assyria, followed by details of the original tablet from which it was copied, ensuring accuracy word for word. The library, which was actually several collections housed in different rooms within his palaces, the Southwest Palace and the North Palace, contained an astonishing array of over 30,000 cuneiform tablets and writing board fragments. These clay tablets, inscribed with wedge-shaped characters, covered an incredible range of subjects. There were thousands of divination texts, crucial for Assyrian statecraft. These included omen series, based on the examination of sheep livers, hepatoscopy, the movements of stars and planets, astrology, abnormal births, and everyday occurrences. Dream interpretation texts were also numerous. These were not seen as mere superstition, but as scientific methods for understanding divine will and predicting the future. Literary works formed another major part of the collection. The most famous of these is the standard Babylonian version of the Epic of Gilgamesh, which includes the iconic flood story that has striking parallels with the biblical account of Noah's Ark. Other epics and myths included the Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation epic, the myth of Adapa, and the story of Etana. There were also hymns, prayers, magical incantations to ward off evil spirits or cure diseases, and extensive medical texts detailing diagnoses and prescriptions. Beyond these, the library housed historical records, royal inscriptions, administrative documents, letters between the king and his officials, legal contracts, and important scholarly works. These included lexical lists, essentially dictionaries of Sumerian and Akkadian words, grammatical texts, mathematical tables, and astronomical observations. The level of organization was remarkable for its time. Tablets were often grouped by subject or series, and some may have had clay labels or tags indicating their contents attached to the chests or shelves where they were stored. Ashurbanipal even included curses on some tablets to deter theft or damage. Whosoever shall carry off this tablet may Ashur and Ninlil, angered and grim, cast him down, erase his name, his seed in the land. The library's discovery in the mid-19th century by archaeologists Austin Henry Layard and Hormuzd Rassam was a watershed moment for understanding ancient Mesopotamian civilization. The tablets were found shattered and mixed as Nineveh was violently sacked and burned by a coalition of Babylonians and Medes in 612 BC. Paradoxically, the fires that destroyed the palaces baked many of the clay tablets, making them more durable and preserving them for millennia. The decipherment of these tablets, particularly George Smith's dramatic realization in 1872 that one fragment contained a flood story similar to Genesis, caused a worldwide sensation. Ashurbanipal's library opened up a lost world of Assyrian and Babylonian literature, religion, science, and daily life, providing an unparalleled resource that continues to be studied by scholars today. It stands as a testament to one king's extraordinary vision of collecting and preserving the accumulated wisdom of his world.